Hi, my name is Megan Bowden. I'm a ranger with the National Parks and Wildlife Service. I've been with them for about 30 years now, and I'm currently employed to manage the rebuilding program for the 11 huts that were lost in the 2020 bushfires. We have over 70 huts in the national parks, and they were all different from the way they were built, from log cabins to stone huts, and from big ones from Kurringo homestead down to little humpies like the Love Nest and Sally's. Many of them were saved due to efforts of firefighters during the fires, but unfortunately we lost 11 of those huts due to the major fires that came through here in 2020. We looked at recording the remains of some of these huts, and then we went through a process of deciding whether we should rebuild them. So the historic heritage conventions enable us to look at rebuilding these structures as a way of keeping them alive and keeping the social connection. So even though the fabric's gone, it's the families, it's the people that used them when they were working up here as cattlemen or during the construction of the Snowy scheme, or whether they use them later for skiing, walking or riding. So it's keeping those people connections alive. And we talked with the Kosciuszko Huts Association and the families associated with them, like the vicaries from Vicaries Hut. So they were all very keen to see the huts rebuilt. We've developed a program, again in consultation with the families, the descendants of the people who built and lived in these huts, as well as members of the Kosciuszko Huts Association. And we've worked out a program of how to rebuild them over the next 3 years. So we have employed 2 staff members to work on the huts who've got building skills, so Roger and Peter, and they worked on this hut actually after 2003, so it's nice to keep that connection going with them, and they're seeing this hut come to life again. The 70 huts we have in the National Park are built with all different materials. So the stone cabins down at G-High were built for the fishermen and the graziers, through the split slab at Oldfields Hut. And it's really important that we teach the next generation of how to build these sorts of structures and to use the tools with splitting slabs, being able to use a maul and froe. So just like you're splitting firewood, I'm using a big timber mallet and a knife to actually split these slabs for building construction. So it's important to keep these skills alive, because otherwise they'll disappear. And it's a real art in being able to use these tools and keep them sharp, and being able to select the right tree and be able to know that that's a nice straight grain, which will give you a nice straight weatherboard. So we're hoping through this rebuilding program we can train the next generation of hut conservers to keep these huts alive for another 100 years.
Okay, my name's Bob Moon. I'm a volunteer member of Kosciuszko Huts Association, who, with partnership with National Parks and Wildlife, look after and maintain the huts in Kosciuszko National Park. It's something in my blood now, but I just love the huts, and every hut is different. Every hut has got its unique history, be it cattle people, sheep people, or gold miners, or cross-country skiers, or Snowy Mountains Authority. They've all got a tale to tell, and I consider it's part of Australia's heritage, these huts, that maintain these stories about them. So I'm actually enjoying watching the guys, the carpenters here working. They've really done a magnificent job so far. Just the finish if you ever look at the posts and that, they've all been sanded, they've all been round corner, they're not rough anymore. Quality work. I'm really pleased to be working with these guys too.
So after the fires, we were able to salvage some of the timber that was the trees that were burnt in the fires. They were fallen if they were posed to be a risk on the sides of the road, so we were able to salvage some of that timber. And using local millers, we were able to mill that timber into 4x2s and splayed boards that we can use in these huts. So it's quite good to be able to use those timbers, because they've been through the fire, they're being recycled and are still living on in the hut. So I quite like that connection with the timber as well. So going on when we rebuilt the huts after 2003, it took us about 3 months of work for each hut. Some of them are in remote locations, so you can't drive to them, or it takes you about 2 hours to drive there. So some of them will require actually helicoptering materials into and camping on site. Brooks and Delaney's unfortunately we lost in 2003, so we had plans already for those huts, but we looked at those and ways of trying to make them more fireproof. So we're going to actually install shutters on them, and we treated the timber with retardant. All the window sills and anything horizontal, we've sloped them and covered them with corrugated iron. So if any embers hit the hut during a fire, they're going to shed off, because 85% of buildings are lost due to ember attack. So we've looked at ways to try and make them more fire resistant. Look, the challenges of doing work in the mountains, I think everybody faces, is that it's the mountain weather. So the guys here have experienced snow, sub-zero temperatures, so yeah, some pretty wet and challenging weather, but that's part of being in the mountains, and it's sort of a bit of a remembering how people were living when they were living up here in canvas tents and wool blankets. So it gives you a bit of an idea of what they had to put up with, is that the weather that we're putting up with now. So we've been doing a lot of history research on the hut. So you've got the fabric and trying to look at the existing plans and making them more fireproof. But I've been working with volunteers, getting them involved with coming to help with the rebuilding, because it's keeping those people connections going. So I've had volunteers from Kosciuszko Huts Association and others who've come and helped sand and apply fire retardant on the boards as well. So it gets people involved in realising that these structures are important as little living museums, and they've got that connection with the place that they'll come back to, and they'll bring their family to as well. And that's what I love about the National Park, is it's got so many layers of history. So we found that this hut here was built in 1910 as a travellers' rest hut by the government. They were trying to promote tourism, skiing in the Kiandra area. Then we found some more information that there was actually a pub in the area called the Sawyers Arms. So it was a hotel that was built in the 1860s to provide shelter and liquid refreshments for the miners who were working in the Kiandra area in the gold rush. Travellers and miners used to come by ship to Twofold Bay and Rimbula, and then travel by horseback through this area, and they'd stay at inns like this along the way. So this was the hut after it was first built in 1910, and it's wonderful to see the people on horseback and dressed up in warm gear. There's many stories of people being stuck in snowstorms up here. The mailman used to come and take mail into Kiandra, used to swap from horseback to skis to ski the rest of the way into Kiandra. There were stables at the back here where they used to keep horses, and there would have been a storeroom area as well. And so people were in Cobb & Co coaches, used to come through here, change the horses, or they're on horseback, have shelter here, and then go through into Kiandra or to other areas. So it's provided shelter for over 100 years for people coming through this area. So we commenced rebuilding of this hut in February last year, and after about 3 months we've completed the building side of things, and now just finishing off the painting of the timbers. So the timbers have had extra fire protection added to them. They've been treated with a timber defence and then had a covering over the top which also has some fire retardant in them. We've added some sprinklers to the hut, and so when the fire approaches we'll install a pump that's attached to the water tank, and it'll trigger the sprinkler system, and a certain amount of water will run back into the gutters and then run back down into the tank and then through the pump again. So the idea is that it will provide extra fire protection when the fire is coming, and it will cycle the water through the pump, and so it will keep running until it runs out of fuel. So we've added a table inside the hut, and we've been able to use some of the leftover boards from the walls, and we've made it nice and big, and the guys cut it all and then assembled it inside the hut and fixed it down strong, because the last table we built got stolen. So we're hoping this one is attached firmly enough that it will stay here for the long term.
So, welcome to Sawyers Hill Rest House. This is the first of 11 huts we're rebuilding after the 2020 bushfires. So as you know, changes in Heritage Convention has allowed us to rebuild huts that have been lost more than 50%. After 2003, we re-looked at the way we were managing heritage structures. The old rule was once more than 50% of the structure was lost, it was then managed as a ruin. Changes in Heritage Convention, Clause 20 of the Borough Charter says that you can consider rebuilding as a way of returning social significance. So that's that people connection.
Any idea of cost?
Not at this stage, no.
Nothing.
All worth it, Rob.
Someone's got to ask.
I must say, I really like the fire control measures here. I think they're, for a site that's as vulnerable as this one, public place, they're very discreet and they're really well targeted. And I think it's really good to see them done so sensibly.
So an important part of this program is the fabric of the huts and how they've been built. So it's a building style that you don't see in modern buildings. So it's good to be able to keep these styles alive so people can see how buildings were built in the early 1900s. But it's also important to the many families who either built these huts or the descendants of the families who built the huts. So it's really good to have the families and their descendants come back and be able to see how their family were living in the mountains.
I'd first like to acknowledge country. We acknowledge the Indigenous nations that are the traditional custodians of Kosciuszko National Park. We show our respect for elders past, present and emerging. Thanks again to Roger, Peter and the many volunteers who rebuilt Sawyers number 3, and hopefully will stand another 20 years, 30 years. So we'll have to hand the baton on to the next people to hopefully keep it standing. So thanks very much, and we might just have a snip ribbon.
It's nice to see Sawyers Hut back up standing again. It was a bit sad to see it when it was burnt in the 2020 fires after losing it in the 2003 fires. So it's been wonderful involving the National Park staff who built the hut after the 2003 fires. So it's been nice involving people who've got a passion for the huts as much as we do. We've had rain, we've had snow. It's been challenging with the weather, but it's made it more satisfying to actually see it standing here. And then we're starting on the next of the 10 huts. So now working on Delaney's hut, and then starting to work on Vickery's hut as well, which is that log cabin. Even though the weather's been a bit challenging, we've been able to keep construction happening, and then hopefully we can. Things will speed up again now the weather's improved.